July 20th, 1969. 17 minutes past 8 in the evening. The planet stood still. Over 600 million people were watching, all at the same time. In living rooms from New York to Tokyo, the entire world paused. A collective breath held. Think about the silence in those rooms, the flickering light of vacuum tube televisions, the grainy, ghostly signal traveling through the void. They saw it, a silver-clad figure, appearing more like an apparition than a man. He descended the ladder, slowly, step by step, into a desert of gray, fine-grained dust. Then, the voice, distorted by 238,000 miles of vacuum, crackling through the static of history.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In that moment, the Earth felt small, fragile. For the first time, the impossible was real. Humanity had left its cradle. We had stepped onto a celestial body that had governed our myths, our tides, and our calendars since the dawn of time. It was the ultimate triumph of reason, of engineering, of the human spirit. It was the moment we became a multi-planetary species. But then, the dust settled. And as the eagle sat in the absolute silence of the sea of tranquility, a different kind of dust began to settle, in the minds of the observers. Because the silence of the moon is total. But for some, these images screamed with contradictions. It started with a question about a flag that appeared to ripple in a windless vacuum. Then came the questions about the stars, or rather, the terrifying, empty lack of them. And the shadows, strange, divergent, inconsistent. For over 50 years, the official narrative has been a pillar of modern history. Yet, for a significant and growing portion of the population, these frames are not a record of a cosmic journey. They see something else. A masterpiece of cinematography, a high-security soundstage, directed by hidden hands, motivated by the highest stakes of the Cold War. The evidence for the landing is massive. Thousands of tons of machinery, millions of pages of data. But the arguments against it? Skeptics claim they are hidden in plain sight. What happens when the most significant event in history is viewed through the lens of absolute doubt? When the giant leap is scrutinized not as a feat of physics, but as a feat of propaganda. This is the investigation into the greatest achievement or the greatest deception in human history. To understand the doubt, we have to look at the pressure. The Apollo program wasn't just a mission, it was a mobilization, a total effort of a nation's industrial, scientific, and psychological soul. It was born in the freezing shadow of the Cold War. Two superpowers, one goal, ideological supremacy. And in the late 1950s, the Soviet Union was winning. Sputnik, the first satellite, Laika, the first living creature in orbit. And in 1961, Yuri Gagarin, the first human to circle the Earth. The United States was reeling. They were losing the race. On May 25, 1961, President John F. Kennedy stood before Congress. He made a pledge, a daring, perhaps impossible pledge, to land a man on the moon and return him safely, before the decade was out. The goal? It sounded like pure science fiction. At that time, NASA had only 15 minutes of manned spaceflight experience. 15 minutes. To get to the moon, they had to invent everything from scratch. Navigation computers, life support systems, heat shields, and the rockets themselves. The Mercury and Gemini programs were the practice rounds. They taught NASA how to rendezvous, how to dock, how to walk in space. But Apollo? Apollo was the end game. The human cost was real. In 1967, Apollo 1 exploded on the launch pad during a test. 3 astronauts died in seconds, Grissom, White, and Chaffee. The program almost died with them, but the race wouldn't wait. Over the next 8 years, the United States poured everything into NASA. The cost? $25.8 billion. In today's money, that's over $150 billion. At its peak, the program consumed 4% of the entire US federal budget. Think about that. 4 cents of every dollar the government spent went to the moon. It required 400,000 people, janitors, seamstresses sewing the spacesuits by hand, code writers using punch cards, and it all led to one machine, the Saturn V, designed under Werner von Braun. To this day, it is the most powerful rocket ever brought to operational status. 363 feet tall, taller than the Statue of Liberty. It was composed of 3 million parts. At liftoff, its 5 F1 engines generated 7.6 million pounds of thrust. It consumed 15 tons of fuel per second. The vibration was so powerful, it was recorded on seismographs thousands of miles away. Observers described the sound as a physical blow to the chest, a sound that felt like it would liquefy your organs. On July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 launched. Armstrong, Aldrin, Collins. Their destination lay 238,000 miles away. The journey took 4 days. Imagine the isolation. 3 men in a pod the size of a large car, traveling through a lethal void. Upon reaching lunar orbit, Armstrong and Aldrin entered the lunar module, the Eagle. Michael Collins remained behind, orbiting alone in the command module Columbia, the loneliest man in the universe. The descent, it was almost a disaster. As they approached the surface, the computer began to scream. Program alarms. 1202 and 1201. Executive overflows. The computer was literally drowning in data. Armstrong had to take manual control. He looked out the window and saw a field of boulders, a death trap. He hovered, searching for a smooth spot. As the fuel gauge dropped towards 0, down to 60 seconds, down to 30. When the pads finally touched the dust, they had less than 20 seconds of fuel remaining. They had made it. For 21 hours and 36 minutes, the Eagle stayed on the moon. They collected 47.5 pounds of rocks. They deployed scientific instruments. And they took the photographs. The images that would define the 20th century. This is the official record, supported by a mountain of evidence. But for the skeptics, the very perfection of this narrative is the problem. Born from desperate political need, was it too perfect to be true? Look closely at the record. When independent researchers and photographers began to analyze the footage, they saw things. Details that didn't seem to fit the environment. 3.1. The lighting and the divergent shadows. Let's talk about the light. On the moon, there is only one primary light source, the sun, 93 million miles away. In a vacuum, with a single source that far away, shadows should be perfectly parallel. They should also be deep, obsidian black. Why? Because there is no atmosphere, no air to scatter light into the dark areas. But look at the photos. In many Apollo 11 shots, the shadows diverge. They point in different directions. One rock's shadow goes one way, the module's shadow goes another. Skeptics say this is a point source error, the kind you see on a movie set. Multiple studio lamps, positioned close to the subjects, creating fan-like shadow patterns. But it goes further. Look at Buzz Aldrin descending the ladder. He is in the total shadow of the lunar module. Logically, he should be a silhouette, a black shape against a bright ground. Yet, he is brightly illuminated. You can see every detail of his suit, every buckle, every strap. NASA explains this with lunar regolith reflectivity. They say the moon's surface acted like a giant mirror, reflecting sunlight back into the dark spots. But skeptics aren't buying it. The moon's surface is dark. It has an albedo of roughly 12%. That's about the same as worn asphalt or coal. Can coal reflect enough light to illuminate a shadowed astronaut with that kind of clarity? Or was there a secondary fill light just off camera? 3.2. The missing stars and the sky of void. Now, look up, or try to. The moon has no atmosphere, no clouds, no smog. In the vacuum of space, the sky should be a blinding tapestry of light, brighter than any desert sky on Earth. Yet, in every single photograph, the sky is a featureless, pitch-black void, total darkness. NASA's answer? Exposure. The cameras used short exposures to capture the bright surface and the white suits. The stars were simply too dim to register on the film. It's a standard photographic explanation, but skeptics find it unsettling. They argued that the astronauts, trained observers, would have wanted to capture the heavens. Why is there not a single photo specifically designed to capture the stars? Was it because accurately mapping the star field for a hoax would have been too difficult? Was it easier to just use a black velvet curtain? 3.3. The motion of the flag. Then there is the flag, the iconic image, the stars and stripes on the lunar surface. As it's planted, it appears to ripple, to wave. In a vacuum, where there is no air, there can be no wind. So why does it move? NASA says it's mechanical. The flag was held out by a horizontal crossbar, a telescopic arm. On Apollo 11, this arm jammed. It didn't extend all the way. This left the fabric bunched up in ripples. And when the astronauts twisted the pole, the momentum caused it to swing. Without air to stop it, the vibration lasted for a long time. But skeptics point to the video. They see moments where the flag seems to move even when the astronauts aren't touching it. They see a draft, a breeze, on a soundstage. 3.4. The sea rock and the precision crosshairs. Look even closer. Look for the glitches. In one specific photo, a rock appears, and on that rock is a letter. A perfectly formed serif-style letter C. Critics say it looks like a prop marker, a set designer's label, accidentally turned toward the lens. NASA says it was a stray hair, a fiber that fell onto the photo during printing. But then, look at the crosshairs. The reticles. These are the small black crosses etched into the camera glass for measurement. They are inside the camera, between the lens and the film. Geometrically, they must always be on top of the image. But in several photos, the crosshairs appear to be behind objects, behind the equipment, behind the flag. How is that possible? To the doubters, this is a smoking gun, evidence of composite photos, layers, masking errors in a darkroom. 3.5. The missing blast crater. Finally, look at the ground. The Eagle's engine produced 10,000 pounds of thrust. Logic says that force should have blasted a hole in the soft dust, a crater. Instead, the pads sit on seemingly undisturbed ground, and there is no dust on the pads themselves. NASA explains that in a vacuum, exhaust gases dissipate instantly. The pressure was actually low, but for those who doubt, it looks like a model, lowered by a crane onto a studio floor. If it was staged, how was it done? The theory is simple. The US realized they couldn't meet the deadline, but they couldn't afford to lose the Cold War. So, they opted for a simulation, a movie the world would believe was real. 4.1. The Kubrick connection. The name that comes up most? Stanley Kubrick. In 1968, Kubrick released 2001, A Space Odyssey. The effects were incredible, indistinguishable from the footage NASA would produce a year later. Did the government recruit him? Some believe he used front projection, a technique he perfected in 2001 to create the lunar horizon. His family denies it, consistently, but conspiracy theorists look at his 1980 film The Shining as a confession. The boy, Danny, wearing an Apollo 11 sweater, the room number changing from 217 to 237. The distance to the moon? Roughly 237,000 miles. Is it a secret code or just a coincidence? 4.2. The Van Allen Belt Barrier. Then there is the radiation. The Van Allen belts. Layers of highly energetic particles surrounding the Earth. Some researchers argue that the radiation there is lethal, that it would have fried the electronics and killed the men inside. They claim a thin aluminum hull wasn't enough. NASA says they passed through the thinnest part of the belt at high speed, but the doubt remains. Did they really know enough in 1969 to gamble those lives? 4.3. The Whistleblower and the Lost Data. In 1976, Bill Kaysing published a book, We Never Went to the Moon. He had worked for Rocketdyne, the company that built the engines. He claimed he saw documents showing the chance of success was 1 in 10,000. He argued the astronauts were actors, that the rocks were fakes. But the most unsettling fact, NASA lost the original high-resolution tapes. In the 70s and 80s, they erased and reused 200,000 magnetic tapes to save money. Among them, the original recordings of the greatest event in human history. Why would they be so careless with the most important data ever recorded? 4.4. The Logistic Paradox. The biggest argument against a hoax? 400,000 employees. How do you keep 400,000 people silent for 50 years? Theory proponents have an answer: compartmentalization. They say 99% of the workers were doing real work, building real rockets. But the rocket only went into orbit, and the footage was swapped. Only a few people at the top needed to know the truth. Is it possible? To the scientific community, these theories are an insult. They point to evidence that is practically impossible to fake. 5.1. The lunar samples. They brought back 842 pounds of rocks. These samples have been studied in over 50 countries, including the Soviet Union. The verdict? These are not Earth rocks. They contain no water. They are pitted with microscopic micrometeoroid craters. They show billions of years of direct cosmic radiation. Manufacturing these rocks in 1969? It would have required knowledge we only gained by going there. 5.2. The Soviet Silence. The Cold War was a game of winners and losers. The Soviets were tracking Apollo. They were desperate to win. If there was any evidence of a hoax, they would have used it. They would have humiliated the US and ended the Cold War on the spot. Instead, they acknowledged the landing. They congratulated NASA. Their silence is more powerful than any photograph. 5.3. The Laser Retroreflectors. The crews left behind mirrors, small arrays called laser-ranging retroreflectors. For 50 years, observatories in Texas and France have fired lasers at those coordinates. The beams hit the mirrors and return to Earth. We measured the distance to the moon within millimeters. Unless someone placed those mirrors there with extreme precision, those lasers would not return. 5.4. Modern satellite imagery. In 2009, the LRO began mapping the moon in high detail. The images show everything: the descent stages, the rover tracks, even the dark paths where the astronauts walked. These images have been confirmed by Japan, by India, by China. None of them found a film set. They found the ruins of an expedition. So, why do we still doubt? Why do polls show that 20% of the population believes it was a hoax? The answer is in the credibility gap. The late 60s were the era of the big lie. Vietnam, Watergate. When people realize their leaders can lie about war, it becomes easy to believe they can lie about the stars. There is also the complexity gap. We understand the world through our senses. We know how shadows work in our backyard, but physics in a vacuum? It's weird. It's counterintuitive. When we see something that contradicts our intuition, we flag it as fake. It is easier to believe in a familiar lie than a complex alien truth. And then there is the stagnation. We went to the moon 6 times, and then we stopped. For 50 years, no human has been further than low Earth orbit. People ask, if we could do it then, why can't we do it now? The mundane answer is money and politics, but that's boring. The theory that we never could do it at all is far more exciting. The Apollo 11 mission is the most documented event in history. To NASA, the artifacts are real. The rocks, the mirrors, the footprints, the anomalies? Just a misunderstanding of physics. But for the skeptics, those anomalies are glitches in the matrix, cracks in a facade. They see a world where the need for victory was so great that truth became secondary to perception. Soon, the conversation will change. Artemis is coming. NASA is going back. Base camps, gateway stations, staying for good. High-definition 4K cameras will broadcast live. We will see the dust kick up in ultra-high resolution. Will this finally silence the doubt? Or, in the age of deepfakes and AI reality, will new footage just be called a better fabrication? The moon is still there, silent, unchanged. It orbits us in the dark, holding the footprints of the past, or the secrets of a grand design. What really happened on that July night? The answer doesn't lie in the stars or the shadows. It lies in what you choose to believe about the limits of human achievement and the depths of human deception. The moon is still there, silent. The question is, are we?